I know Matt Rule's brought up San Francisco as potentially a model for Nebraska. When you look at this roster, obviously it's not going to be NFL players left and right in college. That's not how, the economics of the game works. But if Nebraska wants to move to a San Francisco type of system and style, what are their biggest needs and what are they, on their way to having that might, be the college version of the 49ers?
Massive left tackle. I mean,
sure.
Trent's the best in the game. And you've got kind of this Swiss Army knife, fullback tight end. You got a really nice versatile, other tight end, Kittle, opposite that. You've got the best running back in the football game, arguably the best running back in the game. You have, look, I think Purdy plays incredibly well within that system. I think that he does the things, he knows where to go with the football. He distributes the football. He typically doesn't hurt the team very much when he's out there. So it's kind of this Trent Dilfer way of kind of managing the offense, but he's definitely beyond Trent Dilfer, and he's got some feet. He can go ahead and make plays with his feet. You don't want him doing that. But obviously he can go out there and do that for you in some cases. But I think that would be, that style that they run a lot of crossing routes. They do a lot of clear outs. They find ways to get the ball to the guys underneath. Like with the tight ends, they have tight ends that can also stretch the field. I think that would be a great style. I've often wondered how Ayuk and Debo just seem to get open all the stinking time, but they do. So I think that would be something really interesting if that's what they are striving to get towards. But they need to have more of a H-looking, kind of tight end, which I think Nebraska's trying to find that guy. Then you need a guy that can put his hand in the dirt, but still is more of a hybrid flex guy. You got Fedoni, you're getting Nelson, you've got some other guys that are already there. So more of a true tight end H, but yeah, there's some things there. I think you're still just looking for that manager of the game. Maybe Raiola is that, and you're still looking for that number one running back.
Okay. Is Janiran Bonner a name that comes up when you look at Juszczyk? Like, I know Nebraska wanted him in that role. They talked him up there. Do you think there's more in store for Janiran Bonner this year, and last year was the learning curve year? What do you think his role is for the team?
I mean, I would say yes. I mean, I think that they know that he's a very talented player. They're trying to find a role for him. That's a guy that really suffered such a devastating injury, obviously. And you hope that he's full go and there's really nothing else that's kind of holding him back. But yeah, I think the Juszczyk, Bonner kind of comparison would be amazing. I think Bonner is still adjusting to what it is he's being asked to do. I think he's getting more players in the room. He's getting more reps. He's getting more time. He's having a chance to kind of get further into the system when it comes to physical development, what they want those guys to look like and move like. So that's going to be beneficial for him. I think if I were Satterfield and I was Rule, and I would want to sit down and put on the Juszczyk basically film and just let him watch and just see what he thinks about that and make him understand, like, this is kind of what we have in mind. Like, this is, if you can do these kinds of things, there's a future beyond the doors at Nebraska. There's a great future for you here at Nebraska. Like, we want you to see, like, the end game. This is it.
We're talking with Bryan Munson of Husker Online here on our Allo VIP line. Bryan, let's turn our attention now to the 2025 recruiting class for Nebraska. Another big weekend in recruiting. But before we get to some of those headlines, I was looking at Nebraska's 2025 recruiting class. 3 players from in-state already committed. You look at Tyson Terry, Caden Vermas, and then Connor Booth. We talked about Christian Jones. We talked about Chase Lofton last week, and we've done that a couple times. Outside of the guys Nebraska has committed and those 2 big names, is there anyone else on Nebraska's radar inside the state's borders for the 2025 class?
Well, yeah, obviously, I mean, Pierce Newberry was in town, this weekend, and that's a name I think people need to know and to hear about. I mean, he's heading off to Iowa State this weekend. He's a linebacker guy that Nebraska kind of sees, playing outside either as a Will or a Jack guy that can come off the edge and rush a quarterback and drop off into space. But then, right there in Lincoln, you got Jackson Carpenter at Lincoln Southwest. I think with Jackson, I think what you what you really see is you catch a guy that I think is really still scratching the surface on all of his potential. He's putting all the physical tools together. I mean, this is a guy that trimmed off, multiple tenths of a second off of his 100-meter time from his sophomore year to his junior year, which I think is what's really kind of, busted things open for him a little bit, for people to kind of go back and stare at that track time and go, wow, this is a kid that's really moving. He's got a great vertical. He's a heck of a basketball player. There's an amazing shot of him catching a touchdown pass last year. He can put it all together. He's got some physical tools. So I think that those are two guys that really stand out to me, when it comes to that. So, and I think that, there could be some additional guys, down the line that potentially, could be in the conversation here a little bit, but those are the two obviously outside of like the top five that you really talked about before that I would want to mention right
now. In terms of this weekend's recruits that were in town, any names stand out to you?
Yeah. Jalen Williams is gosh, what a fun interview. Palatine, Illinois, defensive lineman, came in a little bit lighter, I think, than what was originally kind of touted of him, from the On3 database. I think we had him down at 6'5", 280. He was actually 6'5" and about 240. But I don't know if that was like just mistyped or miscommunicated. That's a very big number to be off on. Nebraska doesn't seem to have had any type of problem with where he was at, when it came to his physical stature, because Nebraska's been talking about him playing more of a defensive end, kind of an edge looking guy. So loved the visit. Like, one of those typical kind of things, like just came in with these expectations of seeing, wagon ruts still cut, into the earth in Nebraska and nothing but fields as far as, the eye can see. He was blown away. He was blown away by the university, the campus, the city of Lincoln. I mean, I know people, look, we have subscribers and we have people that read our message boards that don't like hearing these comments. I love them, because the first thing that Jalen gets to do when he returns to the Chicago area is tell everybody how wrong they were and tell everybody about how great it is out there. I mean, I love those firsthand accounts, because he can go back and just correct the record. And he's obviously a guy that Nebraska's got very high on their board. He will be back, and I thought that there were some interesting things like that Caden Vermoss had to tell me, because he was the first commitment in the 2025 class going back to last April. Dylan Raiola, wasn't around the first junior day, but he was there this weekend. Caden got a chance to finally meet up with him. Dylan played a very active role, was communicating with Jalen the minute basically that he landed, in Lincoln. Dylan and Jalen were already hooked up. So, I mean, it's going to be very fun to kind of see how involved Dylan is and how recognizable, obviously, he is when it comes to bringing him up and what he's been like in the recruiting game and kind of putting Nebraska on the map in that regard. And then obviously how he kind of keeps helping out the 2025 guys that are currently in the class, like Vermoss and Booth and Terry, kind of help continue to kind of, be the Pied Piper and lead the guys to Lincoln. I think Dylan's is being very active in that area.
Speaking of quarterback, believe it or not, Husker fans, recruiting a quarterback didn't stop with Dylan Raiola. Nebraska's got to, go get another one for after him. 2 offers out, I believe, in the 2025 class with Mansky and Zollers. Where does Nebraska stand with those two guys, Bryan?
Well, I tell you what, I think it's very hard to not say that Nebraska still has Mansky as a number one guy on their list. Coach Foley has been out to see him multiple times. He was at his basketball game, I think, on last Thursday night. Mansky obviously made the choice to go ahead and go down to Texas A&M that first weekend that Nebraska had their junior day on the 20th. He said he's still going to get back to Nebraska as quickly as possible. I think that Nebraska still looks very, very good for that. But Zollers is interesting. He's a guy that seemed to be almost destined to go to Penn State. Penn State gets a guy. Now he's just kind of picking up offers. I mean, Nebraska kind of broke things open, for him in a lot of different ways. He just seems like if you go up to his Twitter feed and just kind of check it out, it seems like every day he's announcing something new about something else. Somebody else is offered, somebody else has come by the school, he's taken another trip someplace else. What's discouraging there to me so far is that since he's gotten the offer, there has not been a compelling enough reason for him to basically come out to Lincoln and check it out. So I think Nebraska has to kind of understand that, maybe there was kind of a dual purpose thing here to kind of tell Mansky that they weren't just going to wait around. They need to go find a guy that needs to be a really good guy. But Zollers isn't really responding, the way I think that a lot of people had hoped, that basically Nebraska kind of vaults to the list and that he understands it's a game of musical chairs, that he needs to make sure that he wants to get in that take that spot. He's not really playing it that way. So I would keep a close eye on that, and maybe potentially there'll be some more offers that go out the door.
So if Nebraska handled the Dylan Raiola and Daniel Kalen thing about as well as they could have to get them both to campus, are they not handling the 2025 guys right? Is it just not the reactions they expected? What's the rationale behind all that?
Well, I tell you what, the difficulty with Mansky so far this spring has been, the basketball has gotten in the way. And obviously you want those guys to dual sport athlete, go out there, stay in shape, do your thing. But clearly, it's a disadvantage to Nebraska so far that you've got these other commitments that are kind of keeping a guy like Mansky away from visiting right now. Like I said, Jack Limbaugh, who is his teammate, who plays basketball and football for Algona, was in Nebraska for the 20th. And like I said, Mansky decided to go down to College Station. So you had a very critical decision that weekend, that one weekend where it seemed like so far you've been able to kind of get out on a Saturday and go take a trip. They decided to go down to College Station. And I think that was a very telling kind of thing that, that they're still responding to the new interest, the new offers. There's not really been something so far about Nebraska, I think, that's completely and totally sold him about it. Maybe it's the Raiola edition. Maybe that room looks a little bit more congested now. It's a little bit different looking, basically since Thanksgiving or a little bit after. So I think Nebraska will be fine here. I do think so, though. Still, they have to get a stud in the 2025 class, because obviously, things can go really, really wrong if you go out there with a true freshman quarterback. He turns out to be the kind of guy that he is. You got two guys then that could be looking up at a guy that's going to be a 4-year, 3-year starter at Nebraska and wondering when are they going to get an opportunity. Things can really change very, very quickly for that roster.
Last one for you then, Bryan. Name that I heard nothing but good things about from your writing and then from other places as well. Mason Bandauer. What do fans need to know about that offensive lineman?
Yeah, dude. I tell you what a 16-year-old sophomore, 6'7", 265-ish, just has some great film and measurables, great wingspan, smart kid. I think that's going to be a really interesting guy to kind of keep an eye on. I think his popularity obviously is going to soar, but Nebraska made quite the impression on him. And I think that's something to kind of, that I don't think Nebraska was out there by mistake. I think when they hit the Colorado area that first week in January, when they could get out as part of the evaluation process, they were in Colorado and they were making offers to 2026s and 2027s. And Bandauer was one of the first guys they went to go see. So that's not a coincidence. I think Nebraska really sees him as being a top flight, neighboring state, kind of a guy under their nose that they want to try their best to get into the class next year. So keep a close eye on that one, because that's really a guy I think that's going to go from being a regional guy to being a national guy pretty quick, because he's a very talented individual.
If you want any more on recruiting, make sure you check out Husker Online. Check out Bryan's work there. Highly recommend that. Bryan, as always, appreciate your insight and your time. Have a great rest of your week.
We will talk next week, man.